6:30. If you have not signed in the sign-up sheet, kids, please do so. And then I'm going to ask the kids, parents, you can sit wherever you want, but I'm going to have the kids try to move up here a little bit, just so this can be interactive. So if they'll grab these seats on the outside somewhere, that'd be great. Alright, for those who don't know me, my name's Tyler Trent. My wife, Mandy Trent's there in the back. And we're going to be helping Tim nicely here at the end of the table. Tim is a project leader. Mandy and I are just going to be around to help out. Part of today's meeting, we're going to talk about selection. I know we hit that point. Some of you probably already have goats. Some of you are starting to go look at goats. And so the question is, what kind of animals are we looking for? What do we want to see? But before we can really even talk about the animals that we're going to be picking out, one of the key things that we have to figure out is what our goals are going to be. If we don't set goals to start with, then we're probably going to struggle a little bit with which type of animal we're looking for. I'll give you for instance. If showmanship is a really big thing for you, and you're really wanting to do well in your showmanship class, buying the goat that's in the back corner trying to climb the wall may not be the best selection, right? We may not be necessarily looking for the most optimal meat producer, but we're looking for one that we can handle, that we can train, and that we can work with. So setting these goals is pretty important, okay? These shows, guys, there's a lot that goes into them. I mean, I'm going to give you for instance, when we started in 4-H, I was not in 4-H at all. I've never been to a 4-H meeting. Prior to my kids being in this was probably only the 5th one I've ever been into in my life. Okay, but I thought we'd just buy an animal, give it some feed, show up at the fair, do just fine. And I was way mistaken on what all is involved in that. So I was lucky enough to see a video, I think last year, a fellow by the name of Glenn Martin. He lives down in Texas. They show a lot nationally. He judged the market show at Louisville this year, and I got the opportunity to meet him. But he does a video and it's on Walton Webcasting, and it's done by Show Right Feeds, which he's a sales rep for, I guess, or one of their personalities. But he did a clinic it's about a 3-hour video. I'm going to just kind of touch the iceberg a little bit on some of what he talked about. We're not going to sit here for 3 hours if that makes you feel any better. But I'm going to tell you that you might want to get on Walton Webcasting, or I don't know if you can find it on YouTube or not, but Glenn Martin was his name. It's definitely worth listening to because he really talks more in depth about this topic. One of the things he discussed was that this project that you're going to do, it's kind of like a puzzle, okay? And it's a puzzle that has 8 pieces to it. And so there's certain parts of this puzzle that you guys are going to have to put together. One of those pieces, I'll give you for instance, one of the pieces of that puzzle is going to be your facility. What kind of housing are you going to have for them? Can anybody tell me in your facility, what are the things that you're looking for? I mean, are you looking for the prettiest barn on the block? No, don't need the prettiest barn, right? But what do we need? What are some things that we do need? So keep them protected from things like what?
Rain.
Rain? Okay, that's a good one. What about sun? Do we want them to get sunburned? No. So we want to keep them warm in the winter, right? What do we want to keep them in the summer? Cool. Make sure they stay cool. We want to make sure that they don't get wet and damp. That can cause them to get sick. So one of the things in our puzzle is going to be our facility. Nobody make fun of my spelling. I was horrible at it, and I'll probably misspell whatever I. Okay, so one piece of that puzzle is a facility. Can anybody think of anything else that we might need to show a goat besides a facility? You gotta feed it. If you don't feed it, it's gonna die, right? Somebody give me something else? Which one of you wants to jump out there? I mean, you probably missed the most important part of the goat project that you can possibly have. Anybody want to tell me? You go ahead. Everybody here's quiet and shy. The goat. All right, so we got to select a goat. So I'm going to put selection. All right? What else? I got all day. We can sit here for a long time. I'll start calling people. Evan, give me one.
Water.
Got water, right? So goat without water will die. Right? So far we got 4 out of 8. Facility, feed, selection of the animal. We got water. What else? We're just going to go out and,
Exercise.
Exercise. That's a great one. Exercise. Okay? We got to, the whole point of this, guys, is to have a meat animal, right? This is meat goats. So what do we judge? The amount of meat. Okay? Anybody here play sports? If you play sports, raise your hand. What do you do to make sure that you're prepared for your sport? You got your hand up. Muscle, right? So your coach makes you run and condition and build muscle. Those are all things that are great for a goat too. Okay, so we got 3 more. Anybody want to take a stab at what some of those other 3 are? What do you do if your goat gets sick?
You need to make sure you have a backup plan if it's sick, like stuff that you
A vet?
deworm it.
Yeah, you got to be able to deworm it. So there's health considerations, right? So we're going to put health in there. So there's a couple other things left. Okay? So we got our health, our exercise, feed, water, a facility to keep them dry and cool and warm when we need it. There's 2 other big things. Does that goat walk out in the ring and show itself? It's a show goat, right? So do we walk in, we just turn them all loose, and the judge tells us which one's best? So what do you think might be another piece to this puzzle? One of my older ones. What do you think might be another piece of the puzzle?
Like a lead.
A lead? Right. So we got to get them pro. We call that showmanship, right? So we go into showmanship class, and you're judged just on how your ability to show is, right? So showmanship is part of that. Well, that's a long word. Okay. We got 1 more left. So when you guys come to the show, for you older ones, and you show your animals, you just pull them off the truck, walk them in the show ring, show them just like that. What are some of the things that you have to do to get your goat ready to show? What's something you have to do to get your goat to show? Yeah, you were over at my tent doing it last year. So what are some of the things that you had to do?
Like clean and groom it.
Clean and grooming, right? What do we call that? Evan, what's that called?
Fitting.
Fitting, okay? So fitting. Okay. So there's our 8 pieces. Okay? Those are the 8 things that we need to be able to do to put your whole project together. Okay? And if you skip on any one of these, your project doesn't end up quite as good as it could have been. So, you can go out and you can pick the best goat in the barn. You can spend the most money. But if you don't feed it, or if you don't make sure that it doesn't get sick, that really good goat's not going to live up to its potential, right? Or you can get a really good goat, and if you just keep it outside and it gets sick and dry and hot and it doesn't eat, it's not going to work out real well, okay? You can have the best selection, you can feed it the best feed, you can exercise it, you can have a really nice facility and make sure it has water every day, okay? That's part of your daily care. But if you never work with it on showmanship, you're going to show up at the show and the goat's not going to show to its best potential because you haven't worked with it at home. And it's going to be jumping all over the place, and it's going to be hard to control, and it's hard for you to present that animal in the best light to the judge because of that. Okay, so the point of this is, guys, is that this is all these pieces come together to make your whole project. Okay? So realistically, you have to look at all of them. Okay? And here's where it comes to the point of setting goals. Okay? And I kind of want to explain this, and Glenn Martin's the one that said this. I wish I could take the credit for being, super intelligent to figure this out, but I wasn't. When you set your goals, it's going to define some of what you do here, and some of the time and effort that you place on certain things. If this is the first time you've ever owned a goat in your life, and you really have no experience with them at all, I would not spend a whole bunch of time on my selection. Okay? I wouldn't go buy the best goat in the barn. That's probably a waste of money, right? You're just starting, and your goals may be that the thing just doesn't die by the end of the year. Okay? That's a goal. All right? And when we set these goals, guys, we want to set goals that are lofty enough that you have to push yourself to get to them, but not so lofty that they cannot be attained. Okay? And this is something I'm going to say to parents, not so much to kids. And that is, always keep in mind that the whole point of this is to raise a kid, not to raise a goat. Okay? The whole point isn't to have the best goat in the barn. The whole point is that at the end of 10 years, you got a really good kid who learned things like responsibility, work ethic. They learned how to get through disappointments when they didn't do as well as they thought they should. They learned how to strive to get better each year. Those are all things that, at the end of the day, are by far the most important. Okay, not just where you place. Does that make sense to everybody? So I would say, write these down. Make sure you get these down, because these are all things that you kids need to go home and talk to mom and dad about what your goals are, what you want to try to accomplish. Okay? So that being said, I'm going to go from that, and we're going to start talking about actually trying to pick out a goat and what are things that we're looking for, what are things we want to stay away from, and stuff like that. When we get done, I'm going to pass out a sheet to you guys. Can I have one? On that sheet has our next meetings, the topics we're going to cover. I guess before I get started on this, one of the things I wanted to explain, pieces of this puzzle, the next 3 meetings that we're going to be talking about them more in depth. So like today, we're really talking about selection. We don't really have anything on facility, but if you have questions about facility, we'll be more than happy to answer those. We're going to be talking about feed and health. We're going to be talking about showmanship and fitting. I think water's fairly self-explanatory. Kids, it's really pretty simple. If you won't drink the water, neither will they. Okay? So if you get you a big old cup out of the water bucket, and it looks like, man, I wouldn't drink that. And you can ask Evan, because I've made him drink it before. Okay? If you won't drink it, they won't either. Okay? And if you want to build muscle, okay, if we want to have a healthy goat, water is key. If we don't give them enough water, we can pour as much feed as we want. It isn't going to help. I know it's not fun. Nobody likes busting buckets and cleaning out buckets, but if you want to do well, you gotta water. Okay. So that being said, sorry I jumped on a tangent because we want to talk about that. Meetings are on one side. I've got a list of local breeders. Okay, people that are. I mean, there's 6 of them on here, and every one of them's within a 20-minute drive of this building. Okay, they all have goats for sale. Be more than happy to help you. For those of you that haven't done this before, picking a breeder is a big deal because they have a lot of knowledge. Most of them don't do it to get rich. I'll tell you that right now. You know, we've bred now for 2 years. It's a lot of work, okay? But we do it because we enjoy it, and these breeders, for the most part, do the same thing. They enjoy interacting with the kids. They enjoy the livestock industry. They want to share their knowledge with you. So probably, especially if you're newer to this, don't worry so much about the animal as much as you do about the person you buy it from and their ability to help you out. That's going to be a pretty big deal, okay? The other thing I have on here is the American Boar Goat Association, their website. They have a whole breeder list, so if you want to go outside the state of Indiana and really get into this, you by all means go for it. And then there's the Indiana Boar Goat Association. They have a breeder list, which is there's still a lot of breeders that are within a half an hour to an hour from here. There's a lot of national competitors in this state that breed animals that win national shows. You know, we have one locally in Kedrick Miller. There's a lot of other ones too. Kedrick's not the only one. So, you know, if you want to look those up, you're more than welcome to. And then there is this presentation. I wish I could tell you I was a real genius and put this together. I didn't. This came from the American Boar Goat Association, so I have a link on here if you want to look back through this later. You know, sometimes this stuff goes fairly quick. It's hard to absorb. Refreshing yourself and going back is great. The other thing that I have on here is 3 online auctions. Okay, I got Willoughby's and Show Circuit and DV auctions. All places that you can buy goats from online. I will tell you, be careful of the online buying. If it's not somebody you know or you're real comfortable with buying animals, I mean, you can get burnt online. And pictures can be made to look better than what they are. People can be dishonest. So just be careful. I mean, it is an option out there. It's just one you may want to be careful with. So I'll pass that out here at the end. So going over key points of, I mean, this is about judging meat goats. This is what judges look for, which realistically is the same thing we need to be looking for when we're trying to pick our animals out. First thing, evaluate meat goats first from the ground up and from the rear forward. Rank the traits for their importance, which we'll talk about here in a bit. Evaluate the most important traits first. Kids. Anybody who wants a bucket or something here? Can you tell me, in the meat goat industry, what do you think the biggest trait or the most important trait is that we judge? Meat, right? Good job. All right, so meat's one of the first things that we're looking at. Just how much meat is on the bone. Eliminate easy placing. So this is for placing them. So you take, and this is the same thing when you're looking at them. If you got a pen full of, 6 or 10 of them, you take the first 3 or 4 that just look like junk and just get them out of the way. Sift out from the bottom and get them out of your way, and then that way you're looking at 2 or 3 of them that are nicer. We're not going to be placing any classes, so we'll go on to the next slide. So first thing, degree of muscling. Okay. Second thing is soundness and structural correctness. We're going to talk some more about that later, but at the end of the day, these things have to be able to walk, okay? We want them to be straight. We don't want legs out like this, and we don't want legs in like this, okay? Degree of finish or fat cover. In selecting an animal, I'll be honest with you, I'm cheap. I don't buy the most expensive one. I buy the one that probably has the least fat cover, and I know I can feed that into them, right? So you don't always have to get the bloomiest, nicest looking one. If you look at one that has the muscle, but maybe just hasn't been fed like the others, okay? But sometimes that's a better buy, right? That's going to be the cheaper one. That might be the one we want. Fourth is capacity or volume. That's really pretty easy. Width, height, depth. Okay? We're looking at volume of the animal. Balance. Balance is when we put all the pieces, the volume, the width, the depth, the structural correctness, how their head comes out of their body, you know, what the length is, where the front shoulders are, the rear shoulders. We're just looking at prettiness at the end of the day. Okay? Style, really balance and style kind of go together, and freshness. Freshness is kind of a big one because depending on how old the animals are that you're buying, if you're buying an older animal, and I'm going to say an animal that was born in December, and I'm talking market on this side, that's older, sometimes they'll grow a little too fast on you. They're going to be closer to overweight when you get to the end, and you have to do something like hold them back, so you're going to have to cut their feed and try to keep them down. Well, what happens when you do that is they'll lose their freshness. They don't look as good. They look more stale. I mean, have you ever seen somebody who's gone on a pretty extreme diet? Eyeballs start sinking in, face gets a little squeamish. Goats do the same thing. All livestock does. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. So trying to kind of time things out so that you're not having to cut them too much at the end. Let's go to the last one.
Thank you. So when's the best, how old is the best time to buy? Like, when should they have been born to get the best?
Right now, I would say you're probably talking, if you're talking market, if you're talking breeding stock, and we're going to get into this because they're two different things. If we're doing breeding stock, we don't necessarily care when they're born because we're putting them in classes based on their age. So they're always going to go up against animals similar in age, okay? But when we're talking market animals, they're going to be a year or younger. Most of the time, these animals coming in are going to be born in might have a few Decembers. They're going to be your heavyweights, and then you're going to have Januaries and Februaries. Your Februaries are probably, and Marches are going to be lightweights, so they're going to probably come in the 40, 50, 60 pound range. So that kind of gives you an idea. Your ones that were born in December, there's a good chance that you're going to be pushing 100, and that's kind of hard to do sometimes in these goats. 100 is getting pretty big. Some of them can do it, but they're not all of them. But like I said, I want to reiterate, on breeding stock, age does not matter. We're really looking at quality because we're always going to be showing against animals that are in our age group. Okay? So the degree of muscling in meat goats is best evaluated by considering thickness through the center of the leg, the width between the rear feet when the goat stands and walks, and the width and depth of the loin. So thickness through the center of the leg. We want to look at what's coming down their leg and just how thick is that compared to the bone at the bottom. On meat goats, we want to look at forearm. Okay? You guys understand that? Your forearm. So anybody ever seen like Hulk Hogan? How big of a forearm how big of a muscle back here does Hulk Hogan have? Anybody else big? The Rock? It's massive, right? I mean, he's a big guy. Okay? That's something that we're looking for. We're also going to look at the width that we have here. Notice the difference between the two. I I mean, in this case, it's very massive difference, and you can see which one do you think has more meat? Mr. Newsom, which one do you think has more meat?
The one on the left.
The one on the left, right? So when we're looking at these, and this is a breeding stock trait as much as it is a market trait. We're looking for width. We're looking for a barrel. Go ahead. The other thing is like, I'm going to show it here. So here's thin, average, here's another average, and here's thick. Thick is what we're looking for. A couple things to consider, the twist. Okay, so this right here, we want more angle-like, down. Okay, when we see, I mean, look at the angle on that. That's pretty up and down. That's an indication of how much muscle mass this thing has. Let's go to the next slide. Here's another real big one, and then this one was real big. Everybody likes to really look at the butt. Look at the top line of this. Can any kid here for a bucket tell me where the most expensive meat on the animal is? Yeah, I got it. What?
The belly.
In the belly? Well, that'd be bacon, and I really like bacon on a pig, but that's not the most expensive meat. Yeah, right down the back, right? So we have the loin right here, goes up into the rack. Okay, so if I'm gonna cut those loins out, which one do you think is gonna have more pounds of meat?
The one on the left.
The one on the left? For sure, it's wider, it's thicker. It makes it worth more money. Okay, when they take that into market, they're gonna get more pounds of meat out of it. So we're looking for the same thing. Does that make sense? Let's go to the next. Okay, so here we're going to look about length. So we talked about the back, okay, the loin, back in here. The longer that loin is, okay, the more there is to sell. That's more cuts per meat. If we can get an extra, sliver or two off of it, that's more money. Well, we're going to talk about that later on. So evaluating soundness. Soundness and structural correctness in meat goats is best evaluated by considering feet and toes. Remember we talked about ground up. So first thing we're going to look at is feet. And then we're going to go to knees, hocks. We're going to look at pasterns and levelness of top. So feet. Anybody tell me what's wrong with those feet over there?
The one on the left kind of looks like it's tilting, and they're up in the air very high.
Yes. It's really tilty, okay? So sometimes we'll get them, when we look at their feet, like I'm going to say this is their feet, right? Sometimes we get them where they're twisted out, okay? And it makes them walk funny, right? Because their knee joint is twisted, okay? Or in this case, we have feet that are tilted in like this, and they're going to wear over time, okay? Big thing on this one, I kind of noticed, that left foot twist out a little bit. Some of that can be fixed by trimming feet. That is, in these goats, that is a big deal. You have to stay on top of these goats' feet. This is something I didn't know when we got the first goat, okay? Until it started walking funny, I thought, what's wrong with the goat? Oh, you're supposed to actually clip their feet, okay? And there are parents, there's a lot of resources online, videos, YouTube, how to clip them. I mean, it's really kind of basic in terms of you just want them to be square and flat and consistently keep them in. If you let that go for too long, that's literally going to make the joints start growing out or growing in. So feet are a very, very big deal, okay? Kids, you got to look at your goat's feet. If they start looking like they're funny, you got to say something to mom and dad, okay? You older ones, time to get the clippers out and learn how to trim feet, all right? Okay, so pasterns, pretty big deal. If you take a look at this, see how this angle is here, and then here we're a little more straight up and down. Okay, those are weak pasterns. As that animal gets heavier and gains weight, what do you think is going to happen to this? It's going to continue to break down more and more and more. You see old brood does that are, 6, 7, 8 years old, they can start getting pretty weak on their pastures. Again, that's something relative to feed. Part of that's genetic. The other thing that I'll tell you is this is where things like fitting come in, okay, and being able to draw up legs. So when we're fitting, we like to grow this hair on these legs. Why do we do that? Well, because it allows us to pull that hair up and then clip it so that it's nice and straight. Okay? The whole point of fitting, guys, is to show your animal in the best light you possibly can. And there are certain little things that you can hide by doing that. Now, you're not going to make a crippled one look not crippled. That's not going to happen. But you can make it look a little better. Okay? And that's part of why we do that. Go to the next one. Buck need, straight need, so we're looking for nice straight lines. I will tell you, a lot of these have a little buck to them. Again, depending on what your price range is, you're going to run into some of those. But it's not the end of the world. Some of that can be hidden in how you do your fitting. On to the next one. Okay. So we're looking at hawks. Okay. Here we have a nice tight line. We like to look at the tail head and a nice straight line down. Okay. I will tell you that on market animals, especially here in the last few years, this has gotten a little bit more acceptable as far as those rear legs go. I don't know that I'd be massively afraid to buy a nice heavy muscled wether that maybe doesn't have the greatest back leg in the world. The muscle is going to matter. It's number one as far as market animals go. If you're looking at something as far as keeping for breeding stock over time, it's definitely something to consider. The next one. All right, so here's a big one. Weaker level tops. It's a really easy one for judges to see. Just from a profile, I mean, we all can see that pretty easily. So it's a point that they're going to go to and level out. We really want to try to get a nice level top across these when we see a big dip like that. I will tell you, in the breeding stock world, there's some, because we grow hair on these things and we fit them, you can take a little sway back out of them. But on the market side of things, they're slick shears. So, I mean, there's no getting that out. There's no hair there to play with. So, I mean, it's definitely on, if you're buying a market animal, it's definitely something to look at. So, evaluating finish. Unique characteristics of meat goats. Meat goats deposit fat from the inside to the outside. Goats do not marble or do not deposit intermuscular fat. Okay, everybody, raise your hand here if you ever ate steak. Okay, everybody's ate steak. When you go pick out steak, what kind of steak do you pick out? Do you pick out a really, really lean one? It's just nothing but meat? Or do you get the one that has a little bit of fat inside of it? It's got the little white specks. For a bucket, which one would you pick? The one with just a little marbling in it, or without? Without? Okay. I'll give that to you. When you have one without marbling, it's going to be kind of like jerky. It's going to be a little tougher meat. If you have marbling inside of it, that fat, when you cook it, actually releases in the meat and it makes it a little more tender. So a lot of times your high dollar cuts are going to have a little marbling in it. What's interesting about goats is goats do not do that. Okay? They're going to deposit fat underneath their loin and right behind their armpit, okay, up right above their rack. Interesting thing to know if you're showing on a market animal, well, if you're showing on any of them, that fat is kind of hard for a judge to see. So, when you're feeding these things, you actually can take some of that fat and you can make that fat look like more muscle than is actually there. One of the common mistakes, I made this too when I first started, okay, you feed the animal, you walk it a lot, what we end up doing is we end up treating it more like a marathon runner than we do a bodybuilder. Number one thing, when you get these things home, they have to eat, and they have to eat a lot. And you want them to get fat. Now, by fat, I do not mean massively obese. You can go to the other extreme. But the truth of it is, guys, that's actually kind of rare. Very rare do you get one that'll just so overeat that you actually have to cut them back. For the most of the time, you're trying to push them. You're actually trying to get them to eat more than they just naturally want to eat to try to build up more fat, okay? Now, we'll talk a little bit about what's too fat. Okay, go back, please.
Oh, sorry.
Meat goats should be lean and trim. They should also have bloom. Lean meat goats that are unthrifty are discounted. So we want them to be bloomy. We don't want them to be massively fat. One indicator, kids, of checking fat. Does anybody know how they grade how fat the animal is? No? Okay. It's on a scale, I believe, of 1 to 5. And you have the measuring stick right in your left hand. Okay, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to grab your hand. Okay? And I want you to feel the top of your arm. Okay? That you feel on the top of your arm, that would be fat. Okay? That'd be a 5 on the fat scale. Okay? I want you to rub the top of your hand. You see how I feel just a little bit of bone there? Okay? That would be a number 4. Okay? Next, what I want you to do is I want you to go to your fingers. And do you feel that? That's a number 3. Go to the top of your hand. Feel that? Okay? That's a number 2. And then you go to your knuckles. That's a number 1. That's too thin. We really try to shoot for a 3. Okay, so what you're wanting to feel when you go to their rib, and have you ever noticed in a class where the judge comes up and he feels their top and he'll feel their rib? That is exactly what he's doing. He's grading it on a scale of 1 to 5. Does it feel like this, or does it feel like this, or does it feel like this? Okay? So that lets you know, if you're feeling this, feed, 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 feed. Okay? We got to get fat buildup. All right. Now, if we get to this and we feel this, anybody want to take a stab for a bucket? What we're going to have to do if we feel number 5?
Cut it back on his feet.
There might be one other thing we can do before we have to cut it back on feet. Think about that for just a second. If you were, how do we lose weight? We use diet and, I'm going to give it to you. You're sitting out there. Exercise. Right? So the next thing we'll look at, exercise. Do you guys want to see something funny? Google exercising a goat. Seriously. Pull it up on YouTube, not right now, but at some point, Google exercising the goat. You will see some of the most interesting concoctions of exercise you have ever seen. And the whole point of that is that if we start to get them to 5, we can trim them back down. That's much healthier, and it's going to make them look nicer to trim them down a little than it is to try to just keep pouring more feed through. Okay? Let's go to the next one. So this one's evaluate and finish. Lean but unthrifty. So I mean we want a 3. That's what they're saying. We don't want a 5. We don't want a 1. We want a 3. Let's go to the next. Back up or go to the next one. I'm sorry. I don't know what's coming next. Can anybody tell me where is a really good place to look for a goat that's getting a little too fat? Yes, but you usually won't see it in the top line because the fat is underneath the muscle. So you have their back, and then you have the muscle, and that fat will actually grow underneath that. And the truth of it is, it actually lifts that meat up. Okay? Actually makes the meat look bigger. The biggest place we want to look is right here. Anybody got a grandma at home that's got Back flaps, right? Okay, that happens. Moms, dads, it happens to us. We get older, and eventually we get a nice big fat deposit right here, okay? And it's the same thing on goats. That's a really, and I will tell you that's the hardest fat to get off of a goat when you're exercising them. It's by far the hardest to do. On to the next one. So capacity, now we're going to talk about that. So we're looking at body width. Open rib shape, good base width is desired. Body depth, so we want nice depth. Body length, we want length. Let's go to the picture. Okay, this is a good idea. You'll hear this in pigs or anything, they'll talk about spring of rib. Kids, have you ever heard a judge, raise your hand if you've ever heard a judge that use the term spring of rib? Yeah, okay. This is what they're talking about. They are looking at how much this rib cage opens up, okay? They're looking at how much that one is opened up. I mean, this is not a bad looking goat comparative to width, but you can definitely see this one has more spring of rib, okay? That means that top line is wider and there's more meat there. And it is a meat goat project, okay? Let's go to the next one. So here we're looking at depth. So we're looking at just how much is here. In the breeding stock world, this is really, really big. Okay, I mean, it's big in market. Breeding stock is huge. I mean, if you get one that looks like a wether and it's real tubey, it's not going to do very well in the breeding stock world. We want that. We specifically, in breeding stock world, we really want that out here. Kids, can you tell me why we would really want a lot of depth and capacity on the rear end? I think you know why.
Because there's more meat.
Well, there's more meat, but what happens at your house every spring with your goats? Do you have some new ones?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. And then in breeding stock, we're measuring females, and do you think we want a female that's got a big rear end or one that's got a little rear end? Big one, right?
It was like bigger.
Yeah. So we have more capacity. There's more room for babies in there, okay? The other thing we want to look at is how deep this is, okay? Now again, it's a market animal, so meat and width and all that do play a factor in it, but we're also looking at reproduction. So we want the meat like we would have on a market animal so that we can pass that genetics on, the meat characteristics. But at the same time, we need a lot of capacity. Why would it be important for us to have a big front end? Can anybody tell me what's inside that big front end of the animal? Can you tell me what's in the front end of the animal? What happens when you feed them? Where does it go?
In their stomach,
In
or
their
down their throat.
It goes down their throat, and then it goes into their stomachs, right? And where is all that located? That's on the front end, right? So if we got a mom that's going to have babies, and the whole time she is pregnant, everything she eats is getting converted into a baby, right? So if it's got a really small stomach and not a lot of room and it can't eat a lot of feed, what do you think is going to happen to babies? They're not going to get enough nutrition. If they've got a lot of space and capacity there, they do get a lot of nutrition. These are why these traits are so important. Let's go on. Short body versus long body. We talked about that. I mean, this one's definitely shorter than that one is. In terms of length of body, that's less meat. That's less capacity, that's less volume. That definitely hurts us. On the next one. Evaluating balance. So we're looking at body width times depth times length. To the next one. So we're looking for what our balance looks like, and they're saying we got an unbalanced alert. See how it's really narrow and long? We're not a square so much there, we're a rectangle. We got really narrow feet. Okay, this thing looks like a slab. Okay, what we're looking for is like a tube. when we look down the rear end of them, we want to see a tube or a square. Make sure. We don't want to see this. We want to see this with legs. This is bad. Okay, we don't want that. This is what we want. Okay. So here's one that's nicely balanced. Okay, we got more depth, equal length, we got a lot of width, we have more of that rectangular shape or square shape that we're trying to look for. I mean, we're really looking at, this is what I'm talking about, a tube. I mean, that looks like a tube. Let's go to the next one. Evaluating style, a long level top line, a long neck that sits high on the shoulders, a clean breast, and a smooth, neat shoulder that blends smoothly from the neck to the forehead. Let's go to the next one. So here we got, we definitely have a bad top line. We talked about that earlier. One of the big things right now is shoulders that come out a little more forward so that we don't have as much breast sticking out there, and a nice smooth line from the neck in, and then getting this neck nice and high off of the animal. Breeding stock, they really like long necks, okay? It's really, it typically sticks out in the show ring, and it has a nice long neck that sticks out there really high. When you're showing these animals, and we'll talk about this in one of the others, but when you get these things home, which you're going to be doing here pretty soon, you've got to get these things trained to where they will get their heads up, okay? If this goat drops his head, he doesn't look very good, okay? If he gets his head up, and it takes a lot of work at home, training these things to keep their head up. Anytime you put them on a stand, anytime you tie them up, make sure their heads are up, okay? Let's go to the next one. Here they're talking about necks that are too thick. Pay attention to wethers. If you get wethers that are cut late, they don't castrate them early enough, they'll get kind of buck neck, and that's usually what you'll end up getting. And they're talking about nice style, a long neck. Coarse shoulder, smooth shoulder. See where I'm talking about here? How that shoulder line comes in? How it's got a nice transition. I mean, it almost makes like a nice arc from the neck to the shoulder to the feet. Okay, smooth shoulder blended in. This is a nice style. Okay, we got a nice long level top line. We got capacity, clean breast, nice neck that folds in. I know there is not necessarily anything wrong with this per se. It's maybe something that's got a little bit out of style. That's a pretty gosh darn nice goat right there. So, evaluating freshness in meat goats refers to having an appearance of being healthy and not unthrifty. I don't know, unthrifty is an interesting term. A smooth, slick hair coat. Breeding stock, guys, hair coat's a big deal. It really is a massively big deal. So if you're going to go the breeding stock route and you're going to try to grow hair, you got to wash these goats. Not like every day. You don't want to strip all the natural oils that they have. But you got to comb them. You got to blow them out. You got to keep the dead hair that comes out of them. You've got to keep shedding that off. You got to keep air moving on them when it gets real hot. They're just like your dog. If you leave them out there and they get hot, they will lose hair like nobody's business, okay? So we try to rinse them at the house, especially when it's hot. The kids will pretty much just about rinse them every day, if not every other day, and blow them out, even if we're not completely washing them, just so that they stay cool and they keep their hair covered, okay? Because hair is a big deal. It's a big deal, one, for fitting and our ability to kind of sculpt and shape them. And the other part of it is that it's a breeding characteristic. If you have a goat that has really coarse, stringy hair, that's usually the sign of a goat that's not real healthy. Okay? So they like to put their hands on them and check their hair coat. This is what one looks like when it's not real fresh. Okay? And it just doesn't look real great, does it? Okay? And that's what one looks like when it's pretty much spot on. Okay? Go ahead and go to the next one. Remember the important traits. Know what correct looks like. Look at lots of goats. Okay, I can't stress this enough. There's online goat sales all the time. One of the things we used to take the kids to, we still go. We'll go to a goat sale. We're not even buying a goat. I mean, nice thing is Boone County's actually had some really nice goat sales right here at this fairgrounds. I mean, I've seen, I think the highest goat I've seen here went for like $12,000 in this building. We went to the sale. I couldn't afford anything that was in that sale. But what it did is it took the kids, we grabbed the sales sheet, and then we sit up in the thing, and we had a little bet going on where before the animal sold, we had to write down how much it was going to sell for, and whoever lost that had to buy lunch, which the kids absolutely loved. It was a good way to get them to sit and watch some animals, evaluate them, try to find good ones, try to find bad ones. When they thought one was really good and they put a big number there and it sold for really cheap, then it opened the door for a question, okay? We've watched sales at home, just stream them on the TV and talk about them. They're all good ways to learn. The biggest thing I can tell you is that you're not going to learn if you don't go out and see a lot of goats, okay? And you know, don't get offended. When I had no idea what I was doing when we started this, so you know, I didn't want to necessarily go to somebody's barn if I didn't buy something. You know, maybe guys, that's part of the game. All these guys know this, they've done this, they've been there, they've done that. The biggest thing is to get out and look at them and see them. There's a sale in Richmond coming up. There's going to be one in Danville on the 13th of April. That'll have some really nice breeding stock in it. The one in Richmond, I don't think they do breeding stock there. That's all market. There's a lot of sale options out right now. Even if you're not going to buy one, go look. You know, that's how the kids will learn. And then practice your dredging skills. There's a website called livestockjudging.com. They have some free classes in there. You can pull that up. It's great for the kids. It'll show videos of 4 animals. The kids get a click on placing them in what order, and then afterwards it'll tell you what order a certified judge actually placed them and give you the reasons why. It's really good for the kids to help develop the mind. I'm not going to lie, I've probably looked at more of those classes and judged more of them than my own kids have, just because I don't know anything and that was the best way to learn. But it's a great resource for learning about this if you're interested. And they do cattle and sheep and pigs, and they do everything. Next slide. So at this point, paid attention and wrote down all notes, you're ready to go judge a class, I guess. No, we're definitely not there, and I know all of this isn't going to stick. You're going to be getting an email, if you haven't already got it, that's going to have this slide in it, okay, so that you can flip through it yourself. And it'll have that also, that sheet that we're getting ready to pass out. So I guess I'm going to open up some time if anybody's got any questions about what we talked about or anything they want to bring up at all. Great. If not, I'm going to turn things over to Mandy, and she'll go over some items that we have coming up and whatnot.
I'll start these. Just take one and pass them down the table.
Are they done separately, market versus breed? I mean, they're
Breeding stock.
different classes.
Yep, completely different classes. So you will have, wethers are really easy because, you know, they're males and they're always going to be market. We do not do bucks here at all. So you cannot bring anything with horns and testicles, okay? And then as far as the does, there are 3 options. You have the market doe classes, which are judged like wethers are done. Or you can do the breeding stock show, which has percentage percentage does. And those are paper does. Here, percentage, anything goes. If you go out to a show, a jackpot show, or one of our local shows, and try to show in a percentage class with an animal that's not papered, you won't get in. But here, it doesn't matter. We're gonna get you in. We want all the kids to show. We don't want dollars to be the difference between whether you can show or you can't show. Okay. The only thing that requires papers at our county fair are full bloods. So if you have a full blood or purebred, you have to bring the papers to show and to give to us before you show in that class.
Okay, at the bottom of the page that has the meeting dates, there's some other, sorry, Tim, stay short.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's some other dates of importance. You've probably heard that May 15th is the deadline to have your animals entered on 4-H online. For the GO project, actually the deadline to have them is Friday, May 10th, because in the rabbit and poultry barn, we will have, they call it tag in, basically GO ID that night. You will bring your